Thank you so much, Grafana, for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about an area that is a big interest of mine, which is observability. I'm from a company called Monta. A lot of people don't know us, but we are building a cloud infrastructure for connecting electric car charging devices. So we can provide smart capabilities to all of these devices. A lot of these devices, we don't produce them ourselves, meaning that we are connecting a lot of different brands into one centralized cloud platform. And that have given some interesting challenges. But yeah, my name is Jonas. I'm the Senior Engineering Manager for the SRE team and Head of Platform at Monta. I've been at Monta since 2021, and I have spearheaded our Grafana and Kubernetes adoption across the company. Looking at the scale of Monta, so we are at the moment around over 220,000 devices connected to our stack. We are currently having over 30 million successful charges, adding approximately 3 million per month, which is all data that goes through our network. We are connecting over 400 different devices, brands of charge points, so different hardware vendors that are connecting to our systems. And we have a lot of different partners and metrics to collect in this. If we look at some of our partners, especially people in Denmark know a lot of these names. So Norlys, for example, is using the Monta platform for their charge app. We also have UnoX, EV, and a lot of others that are using the Monta platform to power their shift into electric charging infrastructure. During this time, we have had some interesting challenges. So I started in Monta in 2021. Back then, we were 15 people, and we were sort of dipping our toes into this. Some of the issues that we had was sort of the rapid growth in this industry. When we started, this was a very small. It started because Kasper, our founder, had a hard time charging his car, and he wanted to find a technical solution to this issue. This was something that there wasn't that many players in it, and it was a very fragmented market. But things escalated really quickly, and that was some of the things that we needed to take care of. We also had a legacy stack, and I'm coming back to that. And we sort of needed to unify reliability in this space and figure out how we could best manage to observe and manage all of this data. So going a bit into our history, I wanted to talk a bit about how we got to the point where we are now, because some of these decisions that we made early on, had this been today, I would probably have thought a bit differently about some of those decisions. So I wanted to share a bit about how Monta operated in this space. So when I started, we had two applications. We had a Laravel application running in AWS Lambda, and we had a Kotlin service running in ECS. Our observability were AWS CloudWatch in a dashboard in the office that sometimes someone looked at. And that was essentially our observability stack at that point. Kasper, the founder of Monta, a person I've worked with before, said to me, okay, please let us do something about this. Let's figure out a way to do this much better. You can essentially pick all the technologies in the world. Just make sure our latency is good, our reliability is good. And that was sort of the starting point when I joined Monta. From the beginning, we decided to go with Kubernetes, because that's sort of the default go-to, and we decided to go with Grafana. And for logging, we decided on Loki, because at that point, it was a fairly stable system, and I already knew then we were going to have a lot of logging data. We also decided on Prometheus. I'm going to tell a couple of stories about that. So we started to build this up. We set up a single pod with a Prometheus and a single pod of Loki, our Kubernetes setup, and we started to get more microservices. That faced some interesting challenges. For example, when our Prometheus setup went down, my phone went crazy. It happened once. I was on my way with a Monta trip, and in the Berlin airport, my phone started buzzing while going through security because our Prometheus pod went down, meaning that all our data were essentially broken in this space. So essentially, The single Prometheus stack were fine in the beginning, but it also caused a lot of issues. We also had some issues, for example, having a single Loki pod. It was fine. It stored data locally, which means that when that stopped ingesting data, then suddenly we didn't get any telemetry in from all our IoT devices. So we sort of had to evolve this platform. So we started expanding our Loki setup. We wanted some redundancy in our logging. And we also decided on Thanos. At this point, we are up when Mimir around the same time that was released. However, at that point, Mimir was a quite large setup, and it really didn't fit the space we were in at that point. So we decided on Thanos to get some redundancy and to get our data into S3. The same with our Loki. We also learned that storing it in a local volume in Kubernetes is maybe not the best idea. Let's get that into S3 as well and make sure that we can scale this horizontally. Going a bit further, we then started to see some random issues with our Thanos. For example, it decided to double our historic values from one day to another. Suddenly we had twice the amount of requests. That seemed a bit weird, and we could not make sense. It turned out a faulty release of Thanos, which we upgraded to, and we had to sort of go back and purge some of our data and try to make this work. This seemed a bit obscure to us. At this point, we also got a new CTO that had experience with Mimir, so we decided it was time to implement Mimir. It was a fairly large project. Looking back, we should probably have used the community a bit more, but we decided to set up Mimir and got a pretty decent setup up and running. We also started to expand into using, instead of simple scalable, which it's called in the Grafana open source world, we decided to use the microservice architecture for all, so we can scale components individually. Looking back, that decision should also have been made earlier, because we did see some random issues. If we, for example, needed to use the Loki compactor, then suddenly it had issues with our write performance and so on, because they cross-interfered. So the microservice architecture in the Grafana stack is hugely helpful in scaling these technologies. And then we sort of got the final step before going into how it looks today. We then started to talk with the Grafana team, because in my world, having Grafana running in our Kubernetes environment with all our data, meaning if we have a network outage, then suddenly we don't have any insights, we don't have anything. At least with Grafana Cloud, we'll know, okay, things are not working. So we talked with the Grafana team and decided to move our visualization part, so the Grafana part, out to Grafana, but still host Mimir, Loki, and Tempo in our own Kubernetes cluster. I'll come back to why, with some interesting talks with the Grafana team. And we also needed to have some kind of incident management system. We had one Christmas where we needed to be able to alert if our support staff got escalations from customers. We needed to alert our engineering management team. At that point, it was essentially an action in Slack. So if a message came in, then send out a text message to the engineering management team. That was our escalation path. It worked, but it also told us that we needed something more sustainable. We needed an incident management system. We needed some kind of on-call rotation system that our entire engineering team could be part of, and not only our SRE team. So we decided to do some vendor evaluations on this and go with Grafana Cloud. During this process, we have, of course, also evaluated alternatives. We have tried out Datadog. We tried that for a month, and when they came back to us with a final quote, we were quick to say, no, thank you. We are happy where we are. At that point, it would have been more expensive than our entire AWS account. We've also tried New Relic. To our surprise, after their price per gigabyte, they were even more expensive than Datadog. So again, not really what we were looking for. The same with Elastic Cloud. For all of these, we had a couple of issues. mainly relating to vendor login. We are in a critical infrastructure environment. Our customers want to know what happens if we suddenly need to move away from American cloud providers, these kind of things. We need to be able to tell them, yes, it's possible, it's not easy, we are very locked into the AWS environment, but we can move out, and the same with our observability. And then low total cost of ownership, which I'll come a bit back to. We also tested out things like PagerDuty, Instant I/O as incident management, but essentially the price came back that Grafana Cloud were much cheaper for us to run on, and provided the feature sets almost we needed. But again, they provided what we need to run our systems successfully. So, looking at how it looks today, we have a pretty stable self-hosted environment. Our observability stack is running, and it's running really well for us. And we have a pretty massive amount of data with almost 100 engineers that are using daily, including a lot of alerting constantly working out. We're also leveraging Grafana Cloud for incident management and IAM. So we have all our teams have their own rotations in the Grafana schedules. And our alerting rules are pretty complex and sending out alerts based on, so if we have a centralized alert for database clusters, then it will automatically route alerts to the teams owning that specific database cluster. So we are coming back to some of the talks previously. We are sort of managing this centrally, but making sure to get our teams to own their own parts in this and to get teams to utilize the tools that we have in this setup. Luckily, Monta was founded not that long ago, meaning that we don't have that much legacy in this space, so we were sort of had the opportunity to use this stack from the get-go. We also have full org adoption, so everyone from our support staff to our engineers to our C-level and to our finance team are using Grafana incidents, raising an incident if there's a problem. They are also participating in incidents and utilizing this tool. And one thing that I didn't add here is also the K6 adoption. We recently started to use K6 synthetics a lot. Our CTO actually managed to use Google Chrome MCP to automatically write K6 code to get full coverage on our web frontends so that we can now visualize our latencies and our availability on our web frontends across different paths, which this allows us to do. Some statistics on why we are not using Grafana Cloud for our data. So we are logging approximately 30 terabytes of logging per month. That fluctuates a bit. Sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 45, but approximately 30 terabytes per month. In Mimir, we have 15 to 40 million active series, and that is actually fluctuating between that number every day. So we have a lot of things that constantly write and record into Mimir, and it fluctuates a lot. I had some pretty surprising eyes from the Grafana account team when they started to look at our numbers when we were negotiating contract, because apparently it is a lot. We think it's sufficient, and of course you can say a lot with adaptive telemetry and so on, but we also have this opinion that if we have a critical incident, we need to know we have the data to investigate this. And that's why we're also saying to all our engineering teams, we don't care how much you are logging, how much you are sending into Mimir, as long as you think it's relevant for your team, then make sure to get it in, because when it is actually needed, it needs to be there. Because starting to collect logs and metrics during an incident is much more stressful than if you can actually go in and find the data when you have the issue. Grafana SLO, we right now have around 65 different SLOs we're tracking on. Grafana, when we set this up, had a limit of 25. I don't know if that's still the case, but the support team were pretty surprised when we said that we needed a limit of 250 SLOs. Because next year we are planning on adding latencies to our SLOs as well, meaning that we'll go above 200 different SLO metrics we're tracking on to make sure that we get all the data in. The way we use this is that Each team have their own services with an error budget, and when an alert fires, so they are in breach of the SLO, they get a Jira ticket, which is then tracked as part of their regular plannings and their sprints. So that's fully automated. We are running approximately 33 EC2 instances. Of course, this scales up and down, but all of this is a total cost of less than $8,000 per month running this. In comparison, we could not use one of the big observability stacks out there for that price with this amount of, we have checked and we have tested. And all of this is retained for 1 year. Due to compliance reasons, we need to store our logs for a long time so that we can go back and figure out, for example, if there is financial fraud. We are handling people's money, doing transfers and so on, so we need to be compliant in this space. And our ISO auditors have a lot of praise for the way we handle incidents and our observability. Here is a fairly new addition to our system, and I wanted to show how we utilize Grafana in our daily work. This was one of our engineers that built this. And what this shows is actually a real-life map of all our connected devices. So we have over 250,000. Ignore the 168K, that's because the data is still coming in. It's fairly new. But each time a device either connects or disconnects from our system, it adds a record, and we can see where in the world this is being tracked. We can see if it's online or offline, which is allowing our support team to go in. If they start to get reports from customers, we can see if it's isolated to a specific geographical area. What this also tracks is ISP information. So we can go in and see if, for example, there is an ISP that are having issues in an area. We can go in and correlate that data. We can actually use it a bit further. So this shows all the ISPs that are connected to our system and the rate of disconnects from charge points using these ISPs. We can use this data. I've of course not included names up here. It's anonymous, but this actually gives us the opportunity to go in if a customer comes to us and say, okay, our eSIM in our devices are unstable. We need this to be stabilized. Then we can actually go in our historic data 1 year back and see ISPs in certain areas. How reliable are the different vendors, and we can actually help our client make the best decision based on a specific ISP in a specific area in the world, what this helps accomplish. And this comes back to why we're storing so much data for so long. This was something that we didn't think about half a year ago or something like that. Then suddenly we actually had an incident that could have been helped by having this data, and we suddenly said, okay, we need to be able to visualize this. So this is some of the things that we are trying to use the Grafana stack to help us accomplish. Then for SLOs, as I talked about, we are having accountability for each teams. They are responsible for their own SLOs. They get a Jira ticket if they're in breach. And every month, our CTO is sending out a quality report where we are including things like open support tickets and also amount of releases and also breaches of SLO, so that teams know when to start acting on their to make sure that we keep our SLOs to our customers. Then I wanted to talk a bit about our incident response process, because it is something that is extremely important for us. I don't know how many of you noticed that a large part of the internet went down yesterday. I noticed because we are starting to onboard Cloudflare, so we are very vigilant at the moment. We weren't hit, luckily, so that was, but still, one thing that always surprises me about Cloudflare is how they are handling incidents, how public they are, and how much they are sharing. The public RCA were posted to the blog post this morning with a full detail of what happened and why it happened and what they'll do differently. We want to follow that example, and it all starts with how you're starting and running your incidents. So we are running on Grafana incidents, and we're using on calls to the Grafana on call to make sure that we alert the different teams. Then during an incident, we utilize the Slack channel. Luckily, Grafana have a lot of emojis you can attach to messages to, for example, get them into the Grafana system. We use that because when we then need to fill out an incident report, the Grafana system is not we have some templates we need to use in Notion. So we essentially I at least take the whole conversation from Grafana Cloud, put that into ChatGPT, and it already knows our template, and then it spits out a full report based on all the messages that are shared. Then I can modify it a bit, and that helps us do our incident reports. In our culture, we want to make it a streamlined process, and we want people to use incidents, meaning that we have a label we can put on an incident. If it's a false alarm, then we can put that on and say, okay, no harm, no done. At least someone were in to investigate. We have a lot of examples with people writing in a Slack channel, oh, there might be something wrong here, and then a few minutes after someone goes in, okay, this seems pretty bad, shouldn't this be an incident? And then an incident is created, because we want people to create incidents. And we have a lot of them. We have a dashboard that tracks how many days since last incident, classic Simpsons style, and that never goes that far up, because again, we want to create incidents. That is also, for example, when one of our external partners, for example, Subtech, a brand of charge points, are having massive disconnects, want to create an incident, our support team is aware, they can put up a status page, and we can make sure that our customers are aware this is happening. We even have in our app, so I have a Subtech charge at home. When we have an incident involving Subtech and a status page, when I open the Monta app, I see a banner saying, okay, there's an issue with Subtech, just so you're aware you might be affected in this. So I already know that I might be affected by an ongoing incident. Then every Friday, we have a incident review. So every Friday morning, we are going into a meeting room and discussing all the incidents for that week, going through the reports and talking about them, not to blame anyone, but just to talk about it and asking questions and seeing what can we do to improve this. We have Jira tickets attached to all our incidents, which are then being tracked, how many of them are being solved, depending on criticality. So we make sure that we always do follow-ups on incidents, and that the tickets assigned to prevent that happening again are followed up by the teams responsible, so that we make sure that we don't make the same mistake twice. When we started with Grafana incidents, we quickly saw that they have some roles attached to incidents, and we have sort of taken that to the next step. So Grafana have this method of a commander of an incident. We have that as well. We actually have a 24/7 rotation between our entire engineering management, that someone is always on call for that part. If an incident is raised, this person is notified and are going into command to make sure that we inform our stakeholders what are the issues, what needs to be communicated to customers, but also being able to make sure that we sort of do the widespread analysis, so we don't go down one avenue, then 3 hours later figure out, oops, that was not the issue, now we need to go back and start again. This person is sort of someone from the management team that can go in and help out. And then we have 24/7 rotations for our SRE and developers that are being paid to be on call. Of course, during working hours, the teams themselves are responsible, but outside of working hours, we have these rotations of people that are called into incidents automatically. Then I wanted to touch a bit upon tools that we've built internally. Unfortunately, Grafana were not able to accommodate all our needs. Apparently, they have other customers than Monta, so they need to sort of have a widespread roadmap. So we, in best AI style, we decided to vibe code some tools that we were missing from Grafana. This is going so fast. I finished up this deck last week, and there's a couple of other tools that haven't been added here yet. So it is going pretty fast with Cloud Code, can really help a lot. The first one is automatically alerting the incident commander. It was a bit of a surprise to us that when an incident is raised, you cannot automatically call in someone from your on-call rotation. So what we did was that when an incident is created, then we send out a webhook to a service, which then calls in and creates an alert in Grafana on call, which then alerts our incident commanders, our developers, and our SRE that an incident is raised. This helps even in the middle of the night if our support team calls an incident, that the commander is notified and we don't need to do that manually. Because we all know manual tasks, they sometimes slip and then you're left with an incident without an owner. So this was the first tool we built. This was pre-AI, so that was actually done manually. Then we needed to, earlier this year, we decided to start paying people for being on call. So we of course needed to calculate how much do each person need to be paid out. So what we built was a small CLI tool that we run. And then it will go to the Grafana API and see each hour a person have been on call, and then create a spreadsheet with calculations for how much money each person needs to be paid out. It also has some tabs for debugging the information, so seeing all the raw data. Then we send that out to the team, they approve it, and then we send it off to our finance team. The next iteration is an automated system, and once everyone have given a check mark, it automatically ships it to finance. That's the next iteration of this. But this was a pretty important system for us to have in place, so because otherwise it would be daily, and that would be a lot of manual work. And so we built this tool as well. And feel free to take notes on tools that you can. Then, of course, the SLO-driven Jira automation, we needed some custom labels set to these Jira tickets. We also need to make sure that the right people are being assigned. So we are also using alert webhooks to call in and create these Jira tickets. The Grafana Jira integration have gotten better, but not quite there yet. So we're also running that manually. Then something I recently finished up. We have a lot of databases, MySQL, Snowflake, Postgres, and we need historic data. Example is the historic data of everyone in our ISPs and how much they are offline and so on. That is real-time data in MySQL. We also have data in Snowflake. That's a bit expensive to get into Grafana, so we decided to vibe code a tool where you can create a SQL query, say this needs to be run every hour, for example, and then it takes all the data, runs that query, and dumps it into our Mimir, so we get the historic values based on our SQL queries. And it's, of course, MySQL for things we need to store historically, but also Snowflake in case we need, for example, a financial model that we need to alert on. Then our financial services team can create a query and get the data into Mimir, and we can use it as part of our regular observability and alerting stack. And this was also fully Cloud code that built this with a lot of instructions. And we can go in and debug things if something don't get added. And then a work in progress, a status page integration. So Grafana incidents have this really nice feature of custom fields. We're using status page templates, so a template for different types of issues. With this, we can set a custom field with one of these templates, and then it automatically creates the status page, which helps us get the message out to our customers much faster than what would happen previously. One other tool we also built is actually a way to get Grafana reports into Slack, because that's not a thing today. You can get them to email and then you can get Slack, but the formatting is really not great. So now we have a service that gets the email, extracts the PDF report, the link, and then sends a Slack message with the report. I thought I was really clever when I built that and shared it with our Grafana Cloud account team to say, okay, I've waited for this for a few months now. We have it ourselves. And we are always iterating on all of these tools and building them out. Monta is very pro AI, and this is part of what we do. So some of the key takeaways from this. So some of the things that we have gone through. Scaling, it requires really evolving your stack and really think about how you deploy these tools. The Grafana open source stack gives you a lot of ways where you can scale your observability stack. We've learned it the hard way that you really need to think about this and really need to do a lot of planning, because once your observability stack is down, you're really running blind. And you really need to be careful about this. We actually had an incident with the private data source Connect recently where that one went down, meaning that Grafana Cloud could not see any of our custom metrics or any of our metrics, which essentially we needed to say to our support team, okay, we can't see anything. Please let us know if you hear anything from your customers or from our customers. And then custom internal tooling can be a need. Grafana is not creating tools specifically for us. So sometimes you need to vibe code a few tools to make sure that you're covered. And thank you so much. It was a pleasure.